Hi everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today I want to play around with my dry rub technique. And I'm going to do that on some Hawthorne fingering weight sock yarn from Knit Picks. Hawthorne is sort of a rustic 2-ply yarn that has a little more twist than Stroll. And it is 20% polyamide, and it is 80% superwash fine Highland wool. The dye today is some Tulip Tie dye. This is the carousel kit that has, the blue, a purple, teal, black, and pink. And we are going to, I think there's a little bit of water in this container to start with, but I'm going to just start with the blue. And maybe do one color at a time and sort of layer them as we go and sort of try to get them a little all over. I do try, as I'm doing this technique, to keep a firm hand on the skein of yarn. So that way, ooh, look at those teeny speckles. Oh, that's so pretty. I try to keep a firm hand on the yarn so that way it doesn't get like a horribly tangled mess. But I will say that compared to, say, the cotton yarn that I dyed with this technique earlier today, this is sort of going not quite faster, isn't quite the right word, but it's going, it's not as absorbent as the cotton was, which is pretty cool. Well, you gotta be careful to not fling the dye, Rebecca. And then even the parts that I'm holding. But yeah, this is not sort of soaking up this dye really quickly at all, which is going to make this a lot of fun. Yeah, and so this is a technique that is great for some like hand love, some very, not quite dedicated, because it's still random, but you're just wiping this up like you would a rag, and you're getting some variation of some longer color repeats and some smaller speckles in sort of a completely random pattern. There we go. I think we should do some more of this blue. Now, to set the color with the one-step tie-dye kit, there's a few ways you can do this. You could just let this sit for 24 hours and then wash it, or you could heat it in a steamer basket. But man, this technique works so differently with different fiber types. Here, when I'm touching this yarn, I'm getting dye all over my fingers. But when I was using these identical dyes and a cotton yarn, I wasn't really getting it on my hands at all. I'm now going to add some teal. This is just so much fun. And I personally really, pooling in yarn can be a really, really fun thing. But I am a huge fan of a non-repeating colorway. I really enjoy when the color progressions are random and you get something that looks like a random mix of the colors when you knit it up. And so I personally call it the dry rub technique, but I know over in my Facebook group, the ChemKnits Lab group, if you haven't heard of it, I know some people sometimes call this the dishpan method or the rubbing up the mess method. So it's all good. It's all a matter of preference. But I think my intent today is to, obviously I'm not going to use up cover up all of the white, but I want to try to, soak up a fair amount of color. And so rather than having the colors mix as I am mopping them up in the pot, they're sort of mixing as I layer them. And then also, look at my glove. I'm just getting more and more color all over it. Let's do some pink. Maybe not a ton of pink, maybe just a little pink. but you know, I could totally do this such that I had the pink, you know, only on half. I didn't have to do it all over, but I am choosing to sort of go all over. And actually that's reading, because of the blues and stuff, really nice and purple. So I think I'm going to keep going with that. I'm really digging how subtle this is. I mean, this is the same color as, I forget what the Dyepot weekly number was, to be honest. This is pretty close to the same colorway as a previous episode, but I think that that is okay. It's bound to happen, and I wanted to use, I would have used a different color of tie-dye today, but I wanted to use the same one for an experiment, and I had a lot of dye left over. So I thought it would be fun to just do a little dry rubbing. And yeah, look at the way the color just sort of beads up when I added it directly onto the yarn. Let's see. Maybe here needs some. But what's amazing is look at the gorgeous colors of inside this basket right now. It's just, you know, you just with a quick dip, it's just not going on evenly. Even though at this stage, the water, not the water, the yarn is, you know, quickly becoming non-damp. Or quickly getting damper. What is non-damp, Rebecca? But now's the time where I'm going to start looking for some more white sections. And you know, you could obviously leave as many as you wanted, but yeah, the dyes are starting to sort of soak in a little faster at this point because the yarn is no longer just completely dry. But I do want some of this pink down there. But I think that with, if we're starting with wet yarn, we could probably get some really nice effects, but I think overall the colors would blend a whole lot more. Oh goodness. I have this mostly untangled still, which is pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. Okay, here needs some. This technique is especially fun for just really special, one-of-a-kind colorways. Even using these exact same colors with the same mix, there's gonna be differences. There's no way to get like a perfect replication. But what do you think? Isn't this lovely? So I'm tempted to actually put this one and try to set this one in the steamer basket versus setting it aside to overnight and then washing it in the morning. My Dyepot is currently in use, so I am gonna set this aside until we are ready to try to steam it. I thought that, this was just gonna be one dry rub, but now I have a skein of Stroll fingering weight yarn, and I'm going to speed this one up, but I'm going to use, I think, the pink, the black, and maybe the blue on this one, and then we can steam them together once my pot is ready. So the thing about this technique is that you are not necessarily creating a balanced yarn. It's very possible that if you're going to try to make two skeins of sock with this, you would get one that was way more speckled and light and one that was way more dark. So this is something that you could end up with either, I mean, it might be hard to do intentionally, but unintentionally adding more dye to the first half of the yarn than the second. But that's part of the random appeal here. So I think without rescaling it, it's hard to say if this is more of a gradient or if it has some more balance. I have an inkling that this particular one is less balanced than the Hawthorne skein that I did at the beginning. Okay, the half hour, woo, that's hot, has passed. And I am going to remove this beauty from the dye pot and put it on a metal pan. And now I'm going to put the next beauty into the steam basket. And now I'm going to let this one steam for half an hour. 30 minutes have passed. And now we can remove our yarn from the dye pot so it can cool completely, and then we can wash it. All right, let's rinse out our Hawthorne yarn. This is a bath of, actually I guess that water is slightly warm that I just put it into. But, notice I'm not wearing any gloves right now. We do see some color coming on, and ooh, man, that water was warmer than I expected. That is funny. I was rinsing out my tub, but anyway. Gonna rinse out the yarn. It's possible a lot more will rinse out than we've been seeing when we heat treat things lately, because, you know, this started off with a lot of dye and, you know, the yarn wasn't wet, so it didn't have as much access. But actually, we're getting some really, really pretty colors. With the other yarns that I've washed after, I guess I haven't been steaming, but low immersion, they've been rinsing out a lot faster than I'm used to with these tie-dyes. And in fact, you know, you can see that the water is significantly clearer than when we started already, and I think that's just the third rinse. I'm not sure. I haven't been keeping track. Anyway, use a little bit of dish soap to help dislodge the dyes. I'm now back down to lukewarm water versus true warm water. We're still getting a little bit of bleeding, but I expect that after a few rinses, I should be able, after a few more rinses, I should be able to go hang up this yarn to dry. Let's wash our yarn. Now, again, I am expecting a lot of runoff at first, and then I bet that I'm expecting it to decrease over time. But once my color was pretty dark, the yarn almost feels slimy. Interesting. I'm curious if the colors will remain looking this dark, or if they'll end up feeling a bit paler once things are all rinsed out. Because I'm not really expecting the black to appear black. I see that it's already looking a little more reddish. I think it's worked out. Okay, good. Already, we are seeing improvement in the amount of bleeding. But I'm wondering how, okay, those white places are kind of white. It's funny because, oh, you know why it's looking so much darker? It's because the yarn wasn't wet before. I was sitting here like, whoa, things got a lot darker when we rinsed the dye out. And it's because the yarn is wet. Things will look paler when it dries again. I'm now going to add, a little bit of dish soap. Just to help, but you know, like the previous one, I think within a few more rinses this water will be clear, and then we'll be able to hang up this yarn to dry. And I will, as always, come back with the finished dried yarns. here are the finished yarns that we dyed using my favorite dry rub technique with the Tulip one-step dyes onto 2 different skeins of dry sock yarn. Hawthorne fingering and Knit Pick Stroll fingering. And instead of letting this sit overnight for the colors to set, we put them in a steamer basket to steam set the colors and then wash them in the same afternoon versus waiting overnight like I've done in the past. And these are beautiful. We've got some long mottled variegated sections, some speckled sections, and some undyed sections in these yarns in this totally random, non-repeating kind of colorways. The main difference between these 2 skeins of sock yarn is that in one we had the black and then the other we didn't. And I think that the black tie-dye tends to read almost like a deep green sometimes, and I think that that black color effectively muted the blue and the pink that we used alongside of it. And so we've got, even though we do have some bright pink in here and some spats, but we have these more muted, almost navy, maroon, marine blue, hunter green sections, where over here we have the more bright pink, blue, and turquoise. But I think that if we had swapped the colors and if we had done these colors on this yarn and vice versa, the hues would have been the same, whatever yarn base we used. The main difference between the Hawthorne and the Stroll is that Stroll is a 4-ply yarn and is a little more loftier and fluffier, whereas the Hawthorne is a little more rustic. It's a 2-ply yarn with a little more twist. And that twist, I think, will give it a beautiful, beautiful stitch definition, even with this wild, variegated colorway. Now, one thing to consider from using this dry rub technique is that, we have some sections with long repeats of color and some sections that have a lot more white. And they aren't necessarily alternating. So if you were to use these yarns for, say, a pair of socks, you could end up with one sock that is almost all like the deep dark colors, and then another sock that has the more white speckly colors. It's not necessarily a gradient, but it's not necessarily a balanced colorway either. But this is something that can make this yarn unique and one of a kind, and is one of the fun things with this colorway. But if you are hoping for a more balanced yarn, it's something to keep in mind as you are sort of mopping up the dye, and you might want to make sure, say, that maybe you want more coverage of the dye on one half versus the other. And so this is something that you can sort of aim towards. It's a little hard to aim for an unbalanced, more gradient when you're dyeing a hank, a circular hank like this. I think that it would be hard to say for sure how balanced the dye jobs are on these yarns unless you were to reskein them, or if you were to, wind it into a center pull ball. Then you would get a better sense of how the yarn is from start to finish. But I think that this gives it a really, really another fun element to this technique. I love asymmetric yarns. I love non-repeating colorways. And this dry rub technique has all of that going for it. Now, one surprise from these projects is that the white on the Stroll isn't really a white anymore. It's more of a beige. It's certainly picked up a tiny bit of color from the washing. The Hawthorne, the white, again, isn't quite a white, but almost a pale, very, very pale blue. And I'm not sure if this is in part because of the backdrop of the fibers around it, that it looks that way, but I think that in the wash steps the colors absolutely spread out, more so than we would have ever seen with food coloring, where we might have been able to maintain the pure white of the colors. But the stitch definition in this Hawthorne yarn is just lovely. Like, you can really see the 2 plies, and it would be really, really beautiful knit up. Here's a close-up of some of the speckling that we see in the Stroll yarn, and this is something that You know, we really only get this effect with these little speckles and the splotches of color that change hues so frequently because of the dry rub technique. If the yarn had been wet, the color would have kind of soaked in a lot more, and we wouldn't have gotten this uneven and been able to take advantage of the uneven dye job. The finished yarns are fluffy and soft, but I do want to leave you with a sort of word of caution with this technique. There are some risks. If it was a feltable yarn, even dry, you could risk sort of damaging the fiber by being a little rough with it as you're rubbing it around. And you also really risk getting a super tangled mess. You could add a lot more ties, but part of the way that you can get more color throughout the whole yarn is by spreading it out. So try to keep a firm hand on your hank so that way you don't end up with a super tangled mess. And that way you end up with your stunning yarn that you can easily enjoy. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give the video a like, drop me a comment, and subscribe to the ChemKnits Tutorials YouTube channel. I release multiple new videos every week, and I frequently do dyeing live streams. And so you really don't want to miss them, so make sure you have your notifications turned on. To support ChemKnits on a more personal level and to help contribute to these really fun dyeing videos, check out the ChemKnits Patreon. You can find a link in the video description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I have inspired you to go out and start playing with some color and some yarn.